Okay. Good evening. You see where Tolani is? Where you do? I know Sabi. Mr. Sam. Say make him pick him call. I know Sabi where you did. Like when he come back now, it's not like that. Okay, I don't hear. Okay, Baba. Teaching. Good evening, sir. Can you hear us, sir? Yes. Hello, sir. Can you please speak? We have somebody online already. Just don't know. This is Ahmed Olalekan.
So alarm showing.
Okay, showing is the name of the okay, and the other one is Ola. That is that one. Then you want to just double it.
This Ola.
Ola, yeah. Thank you.
I mean, that's what is online. The one online is not even done now. Yeah. Do you want to start, sir?
What is that?
Is your call?
Oh, wait, I thought you had something.
No,
Right. I think you can move to the front, but the way it feels when the room is filled up. No, the colleagues at the back, by the front seats, I'm doing this to fill out and have, and what I call a brisk discussion. No, this comes to the front. So you can have good discussion. Maybe goes to back. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Maybe the camera will take it to such a way that session is well attended. One notable thing in this conference that we have been theorizing, we've been making attempts to theorize and bring theorize what we call the African way. It's born out of the idea that Africans don't have theory. Whatever they explain, they need to use theories dependent on Westerners to augment this understanding. That we're saying no, that if theory is explained, you know, there must be ways in which how to explain, you know, in their own ways, in their own intellectual traditions before the advent of colonial. And so, without saying Western theories are not successful, we are saying that there should be some ways of theorizing the African thing, so that whatever Clark would say, whatever Kalman would say, and somebody from Kenya, somebody from Togo, from the very Republic of Kenya can say something either to complement that or to challenge that. Or to withdraw from faculty of logic. And so that basis that we can have a new discuss. This is probably 50 or 40 session, you know, and we have. And I want to thank everybody for coming to attend this panel. So the organizer remains Sandra Amenahon, you know. And, my name is Larry Deshola. I'm an ambassador to chair the panel. So today we're going to have 4 presentations. And so the panelists are already seated here. The first one is going to be by Michael Agbola. It's not online. Oh, yeah. Okay, so what it does is we're going to continue with it. The second one is by Ahmed Badali of the University of Lagos. Ahmed, you're here, right? Please welcome. I'm going to give us all the theorizing today. Ahmed is speaking to us on what he titled Indigenous Theory of Knowledge Beyond Essentialism, colon, Odifa, physics. Okay, that's what Ahmed is going to take us to. Then we have another one by Daniel Larson, who is also the University of Minnesota, for revelation. And that is titled I Am Right. You are damaged. Colon again, violence and problem of relationality, the writing of vocational crime. The last person on this list will be talking to us on what is titled the role of the Lagos Studies Association in Nigeria's higher education. And that's going to be given by Chidma Uchechi of the University of Nigeria, I guess, in Chicago. Okay, so we don't have Chidma. Yeah, so we have one other things for the whole session, right? Yes. So we have 2 of them, and we're not very sure that the rest 2 of them come. We don't sure I call add share. 30 minutes before we're going to have some 40 minutes to do. But what I'm going to do is give each person some 15 minutes to tolerate truancy in your presentations. And then after that, you want to engage robust in a robust way. This is a peculiar panel because we're trying to break into what appears to be controversial. I mean, people will say, theorize this way, will they accept it in an era when you are asked to publish internationally for me to get promoted? So if you're writing with will they accept it? Well, whether or not they will accept it is a part of what we're going to intellectually explore today. I leave the floor for Mr. Ahmed, who will speak to us from Britain. Ahmed, talk to you.
Good evening, professors and colleagues. My name is Ahmed. It also has to be
your voice is very bad.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, professors and dear colleagues. My name is Orlando Raju Ahmed. I'm a doctoral student at the Institute of African and Diaspora Studies. And my PhD title is looking at exploration of the political knowledge in the farm. So I'm using this platform to actually test some of the theories that I'm using as part of my doctoral dissertation. So for today, I'm looking at indigenous theory of knowledge beyond essentialism, Udrifa Obrio's. And deliberately, I'll be using a particular method of presentation which I've not used before. It's called the accelerative, or which you can call the Socratic approach. So the first thing is, what is a theory? A theory explains why a phenomenon happened. It is equally subject to different socio-political and epistemological changes. Theories are used to explain realities. If so, do we have theories in Africa or by extension Nigeria? Can we say that there are theories in Ifa? Then what is Ifa? My presentation is going to be very brief. Ifa is the compendium of wisdom of the Yoruba people. It is the literature that housed several knowledges, or several knowledge systems, some people would like to call it. Many of its variants exist in other countries and regions in Africa, and this attests to why we have the Afa. According to UNESCO 2008, it is equally one of the intangible elements of the Yoruba. Ifa is divided into major and minor corpus. We have the 16 major and the 240 minor corpus, altogether making 256 chapters. So the next slide is Ifa beyond essentialism, and we are looking at Ogbe, that is Ogbe. We are now looking at the Ifa itself, that is Ogbe, or what it will relay. And it says, Ogbon ìsinmi olúgbọ́n, ọgbọ́n òye òfìkàlẹ̀ sọ́dọ̀ àrẹ̀sà, mo mọ̀ tán sí nílé ọwọ́ àràgbọ́n àdá, ọ̀ní alákẹ́sù ìjọba ìmọ̀ràn, bí ẹni àtẹ̀ká, ibi tá a bá ti rọ́gbọ́n láti kí ọgbọ́n ẹni, adífá fún àjèrè, tí ìṣọmọ bíbí àgbọn ìgbìmọ̀. So the English version says, 2 scores of wisdom is not limited to the house of Olubon. 3 scores of intelligence is not limited to the house of Alisa. Omniscience is not found in the house of Howard Ogunaga. Onialakisu is not king of counseling, like a permanent mass. One seeks wisdom wherever it avails. This philosophically explains the case of Ajere, a biological child of Agonido, which happens to be the son of Ahomima. So the question is, can we use this to theorize or to explain our reality? It's a question, like I've said in my premise, that's going to be a Socratic approach. The question is, we oftentimes speak about epistemological injustice or epistemic injustice and all of that, or epistemicide. But can we also talk about hermeneutic injustice? Can we use theories or the old group can we use the Odufa as a theory? And is it a problem of agency, structure, if we can use it or we cannot use it? And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Do you have anybody around? Okay. Yes. Agboola, can you hear the chair? Agboola, is the chair audible to you? Okay, so I think I want us to discuss paper before we go to the next. Not really fun of managing everything today, because as I said, this is supposed to attract critical engagement from the audience. So the floor is open for the world and start. Where's Professor Walker? He left. He left or stepped out. Okay, somebody should just send a message so to become to audition. The floor is open. This is There you are, that's,
Thank you very much. I would like to speak the foundation of building and setting.
Okay. Okay, I copied verbatim from your last work, page 10415. So, and about the point I was copying, I noticed that there are some, but I'm also not a linguist. So I just decided to leave it, and it's part of, you know, the first says, so it's part of the reason why I'm here, so that maybe you can help me look at the
So I don't have anything against, you know, the method of translation. I asked specifically because when it comes to translation, I think translation is a very, very challenging work because it's not just about looking at a particular word and looking for what it means. But sometimes you find somebody who tells you, it's not just looking at this language of the and that. But a lot of times it becomes to contextualize. Beyond that, there are lots of words, particularly words that are what you consider very that you do not even translate at all. From a word here, you will write it as it is. You will look for the meaning because a lot of times it doesn't mean what it's that it is in English. Yes, so that's just before me. So what you may want to do is to be certain that while you may copy verbatim,
this is also some problem. So there's a seasons right there, but it doesn't provide. Yeah. You telling me to use his playlist link, but it's telling me that it's not in this session. Yeah.
Very slim.
He's supposed to come in as a panelist. He came in as an attendee. This is him, no? Is this me? You see my name. What's your name?
Is it a problem of there? If we are saying that we cannot use our reality, is it more of then I'm trying to link it to our hermeneutic. The question is the question of agency or is it the
I can share the link. He has the link. He has the link. He has the I do not. I will have to let him be. I don't him to panelist. Maybe you should listen to speak.
The basic argument is that fine, if they can explain certain things, certain phenomena in Western world, we have alternative way of doing so in our own society, which led to the idea of coming up with different approach, like maybe Utufa, maybe proverbs. But the issue is this, which I raised the other time. The issue is that fine, if we are promoting what belongs to us in Africa, in ourselves, by the time we start promoting this, and we have some other people in the other, because whatever we call international or Western theory started as the local something. But when people started pushing it, I know the idea of the basic idea of theory is to be universal, that we can use it here and still use it in other part of the world. When it is spread to a particular area, like it's not a particular region, that means it's not theory. But we must be able to explain use both across the universe. But the question is that I know we'll be having the issue of publication. Maybe at the end of the day, maybe you set it to the other word for publication, then you'll be challenging it that this is a localized theory, this and that. My own idea is that we can use it. We decided that if we can keep on pushing for it here and we have other people pushing it in that area, at the end of the day, it become a word and celebrated something. That's my own.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll get some other comments, but I need to get some clarifications. What Mr. Ben was saying is like this theory, as we this was the fact and been used in the paper that is published already as a theoretical framework for the argument given advance. That's clarification. Over. Number two, thank you for the direction. Translation can the Plato's, the Aristotle's address never written in English because by the time we got their writings into English language, a whole lot of subtitles. This is not going to be clear. We know that in the process of transforming from one language to the other, you will lose certain things. But the thematic is still strong, but not going to lose the semantic. That's exactly what somebody's trying to say. On the acceptability and I don't think there is any need for struggle to make anyone accept African theology. There are certain declarations that we need to happen. The idea of theory is a Western concept. Okay? It is not found in African literature. So, if you want to get a translation for theory, highest to go to say theory in Yoruba. Maybe even we say theory. Also, we say theory in Ukole. But it's a Western tradition. However, that concept is Western. But in terms of what it does, which is the explanation of phenomena, it's not to Western. It's unique as every civilization has ways of explaining phenomena in their own religion, their own discourses. And that is why the Yoruba say relation or relation of free, total version. In fact, the duality of them that explains better, nothing also explain. Yeah, that's the so this is what the young man is trying to do. And there is no need, just come back to you strongly. One of the qualities of a scholar is confidence. We send the paper to a particular journal, and somebody who reads what you are by yourself. And I'm sure the journal is a good journal. They also offer you opportunity to explain. By the time you provide a very good explanation, somebody somewhere will see this is theory. Okay, so I'll rest for now and then take more comment before we find it. So,
thank you so much for that presentation, Anna. So I think I'll beg everybody's indulgence, but what I thought of when you were asking about whether this would be an explanation for our reality. I remember Western philosopher Derrida, who I asked this question for who we. And by this, I think he was getting at the question of who do we include or exclude when we're defining humankind? What boundaries we need when we use that collective indexing word? So who is this R that your work is speaking to? Who is this collective? Do you mean a certain group of people? You mean the entirety of humankind? And I think the work of theory is that transposition from the text of the book into an explanatory model for something larger than itself. So it's in these applications that I think, so I don't know so much about the paper that you're talking about, but I think the work to be done in between is to situate that text within a broader explanatory model in relation to a need that is properly specified.
Thank you very much. I think as I also tried to signal that it's always remove the need. That's my advice for not students. Of course, I know scholarship sometimes with formality, debatable, and sentiment and vision. But you do yourself more good on you to personalize the situation. So I'm advancing African theory, not my theory, no, not this theory comes out of Africa. But it's not my theory. I'm not African in that instance. When we get to activism, then we can say Africa and all this. I'll pick it up. So you take notes, it's important that the theory has a large explanatory framework. But one of the qualities of good theory also is that it is not listed in its explanation. However, given person, it's not listed. So times are when you attempt to make your theory universal, it does not catch up with reality. You just have to expose and confess it. I personally support being on this as part of the limitations of the film. I'm sure there should be some audit that will come up to complement our intelligence.
Thank you very much for the final remark that you're giving. Now, unfortunately, it's nice that you've already said it. The question is which you wrap up the situation. And while she was here for the or Mr. Isaiah, I think that there is no struggle anywhere. One said the other time that theory is a Western concept. I beg to differ aesthetic, because what I think is that the concept exists in Africa, but we just do not have a name to it. In one of the papers written by Dinesh 2022, I suppose, in working on terminology development, two questions were germane, and the very first question is: there is a concept. Is this concept present in every every speech community as it is present in the source language? The second question is, even if it is okay, so the answer to that question is either a yes, or a yes, no. So if it is a yes, it means it is present. If it is a yes, no, it means it is present in the source, but not present in the target. So the question is, if it is present in both, the second question is, does it have a name? Is there a tag to it? The answer to that question also is either a yes or a yes, no. If it is a yes, it means it has a name in both the target and the source. So you just adapt. There is no point in translating anything. If the answer is a yes, it means it is present with a name in the source, but without a name in the target. That now takes us back to the first question. Is it present or without a name? That is what I think theory is. Prof said something the other time about can I remember now? Owe leshi oro leshi. We some also say owe leshi oro leshi owe. Toro bason we la mafiwa. That's theory. I think it's just a place of us knowing what we have and being able to present it to the world in a way that is applicable, and such it can be universal. If it is not universal, like Prof made in his last remark, you can then say, okay, so these and these are the, the shortfalls of this theory. So I do not see a contest anywhere. It is a place of us knowing what we have. I think that's the problem with Africa. We really do not even know what we have and what we have to talk of being able to apply. And now that we are coming to know, we are also the one countering ourselves, thinking the West wouldn't accept it. Paul said the other time that he had a paper published in African theory. So if we continue this way, you do yours, he does it, I do mine. Before we know it, they will come. They always have a way of coming, but we need to know ourselves first. So that's my picture.
We push them into the wall. Someday they will come to realize that this is behind us. Because the logic is that. That's the point. My good colleague, congratulations. Some other comments. I expect that everyone should make comments. We have no time, none of time.
I'm just like scholars who want to keep him. They still have struggles with theory, understanding. Most scholars, young scholars, still have struggles understanding theory, Western theories.
And you know that to know how to make yours, you need to learn how it works. And I feel that there's still lots to be done for Africans in African studies and among African scholars to set like standards for theorizing. I think if there are standards, there won't be loopholes or guessing on maybe this is a theory, or I don't think it will fit. Because there are lots of proverbs that actually fit into the context of the Western world. Actually, Marxism and others didn't set out as theories. They were just people explaining what they observed. And along the line, people came up with terms. Oh, this is a concept. It became universal. And gradually, others saw lapses. And then we see new Marxism, Marxist feminism, and the rest of it. There are strands of this thing. So I just feel that I'm talking from my angle, there's this passion, you want to build something, but then you don't know where to start. It feels like you're alone. And then when you come up with it, I say, like this one just woke up from sleep and wants to do what others are doing. So I feel that we are on our own, sort of, in this trouble. So I believe if the older scholars, good scholars among us can set the pace and create the standard, then it will help us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you attend my lecture?
Okay, I did that and I loved it, but that's just, I think the struggle is, we're dealing with a bigger problem. And then it's as if people who are in the race are like, so it's you, but then what are others doing about it?
Okay, so the point I want to make, I don't want to use the word struggle. We're not those things are there. Okay. And you made a point that I made in my presentation, that you don't even have to call something a theory. You just do it. But by the time it is read and interpreted, then it is discovered that it has potent explanatory power. It becomes automatically a theory. Of all the theories that are popular in the social sciences and humanity, very few have the nomenclature theory. They are just positions. The goals why men rebel. I flip through the book from page 1 to the end. There's no one like theory there. But people derive from it the theory of relative aggression. And then it goes on and on. And even Marxian theory. Why is Marx cannot use theory? So when you do a write up, and the focus of that article is to theoretically assert the position, that automatically becomes a theory with which you can use. So if once you use that approach, you are no longer strong. You are not begging anybody to take it or accept that theory. But once you have very compelling, potent explanatory capacity, then accept another text, that's what I mean. No, you don't let us think we are strong. We are not strong in any way. Okay, so let me take sort of this presentation and then we do general random while we take the September. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, evening, everyone. My name is Beniola, I'm a doctoral student at the Department of Industrial State University of Lagos and the development rights and right and you are there. To put on the volume, so that people can always share. And the problem of additionality. So I'd like to quickly do some brief housekeeping here that I think is important. So a few things. First, this particular paper is part of what I consider my ongoing effort. I'm not being taken very seriously just yet, but that's what I consider it to be my ongoing efforts to establish relational as right? Of course, we know ways is very well established at the right time.
Some people, many people, you must be like giants, but not very much as finished. And that's what the part of what it is. Um, and why does this matter? I think it matters because so this is what I call the curse of colonialism, the curse of post-colonialism in Africa, because that event, colonialism and the what comes after it, post-colonialism sort of has set what has become the reference for everything philosophical education. So it has to be about politics and power and post-colonial struggle and all of that, and the economy and all of that. So I believe that we do need, if you look at all of world philosophy, there can be a regional philosophy that begins from that sort of political standpoint, right? We need to ground everything. Scholars such as Srinivas are important to that particular course. Srinivas, Senghor, and so those people who have managed to really enter into what I call the African world. And so, because this is what I'm trying to do, much of my work is going on this, at least. It's going to be who I try to make as principal as possible. That's all I'm going to say on that. So, the objectives of this paper are one, to map the product length of the Sri-Indian theory population and how that theory sort of understands the state of violence, both the place and the placement of violence with human relations. And secondly, to situate Sri-Lanka within global philosophical discourse on the relationship between violence and politics, because that's important if we're going to try to establish him as the philosopher himself, at least for this particular matter. So what you're seeing now is a table that sort of looks at the spread the spread of philosophical opinions on the matter of violence, particularly as violence relates to politics. And so while you have on the left side of that table, the holistic left side of that table, you see those philosophers who believe that violence is an intrinsic part of politics. Not only is it necessary to politics, it is also a legitimate and useful tool of politics. And there you are going to find that is further divided into two groups. The statists, those who believe in the use of violence for the purpose of the state. You've got Machiavelli, you've got Thomas Hobbes, and you've got Max Weber. And then on the sort of right side, on the left side, you have Karl Marx, whom in any case you're always going to find on the left, and Sorel and Fanon. So captured, is the essence just beneath that part of the table. I've tried to capture the essence of that holistic left side of this thing, and that's by using the quote of Mao Zedong: political power grows out of the barrel of war. Right, and on the right side, you are going to find those who either believe that violence is unnecessary. It's not necessary to have violence in politics. Either that, or they believe that it is only useful in select situations, very limited interest. So they are the complete pacifists. You have John Locke, John Rawls, those two believe that the moment violence enters into politics, then that politics ceases to be rational, right? And because for them, politics has to be a wholly rational thing, violence has no place in it. But there are also on the right side, the instrumentalists, Anna Arendt, and in red there, books showing that color is there deliberately because that is my hypothesis, which I'm trying to get in this paper. And just to capture what the essence, the essential thinking of this right side of the table is, these people believe that violence and politics must be kept apart and must be kept as antithetical to each other. both in all of the senses, conceptually, theoretically, practically, even. So why or how have I tried to justify the placement of Shrinka with Arendt as the limited instrumentalist of violence? So that's because, in my opinion, and from my findings, of to study Shrinka, especially its analysis of its history, its analysis of history, contemporary life, and literature, which I'm going to find at this point. One, the rejection of the summary use of violence in settling of political disputes. Two, insights into how relational differences are created in the first place, how these disagreements, political disagreements, are created in the first place, and how they are either prolonged or exacerbated. And three, an explanation of the pathway from which political disagreements lead, or through which political disagreements lead to violence. And then four, a commitment to pluralism. And ensuring that becomes so committed to pluralism that that pluralism becomes the only limit that is sets into its rejection of violence. So don't be violent unless your violence is going to have the effect of opening up a political space of truth, plurality, then you are allowed to violate, basically. So I can quickly look at Srina's suggestion of summary violence with a few examples. So first of all, you consider violence as springing from censorship, the idea that you want people to hold your views, and then basically if you had the power, you would prescribe dissenting opinions that differ from yours, right? And I've taken the example of Srinika's defense of Srinika's basically feminist defense of the choice of a woman to wear whatever it is that she wants to wear, or not to wear whatever it is that she wants to wear. And I take this excerpt from 12 Canticles from Zealot. It's in Samarkand and other markets that are known of poetry published by Srinika 2002. Basically referring to the Yoruba belief in what looks like the equality of women, or at least the freedom that women have to do whatever it is that they like, unlike what we have in particularly Islam, right? So here is he saying, I come in Islam where women plant and teach and kill, mold and build and cultivate, white sweats, of open faces, and income to use the hijab. And that's I come from Islam where women reject the veil and men are without rituals. And then it goes on to then sort of condemn the censorship of women's dressing, basically drawing from Jesus' instruction to cast the first stone if you are without sleep, right? Cast the sanctimonial stone and leave frail beauty shredded and spoil public shame. This murder is the rock of sin, drawing on that symbolism of Jesus, right? Remove the blood in your eyes before, right? And this murder that you're committed because somebody has dressed indecently, it's the rock of sin, and that veil that woman has chosen to either wear or not wear has become what it is as a mere pebble state. It's very, very, very small in relation to what you once see of censorship is. And he also then goes further to characterize censorship. That's the tendency towards the impulse towards censorship. He characterizes it as characteristic of very low intelligence, right? And here it's also referring back to the Orisha. So it's going to the Orisha and the wise. If I shun the exploding tongue, I would just keep over that and say, go to the Orisha, none but fools claim guardianship of final gateway, right? And so because in the religion or the spirituality of the Orisha, nobody claims that they know what is the final way, right? Unlike what you have in other religions, Jesus, for example, the way it is at the life, nobody comes to Father except me, right? So that's what basically showing Christ as advocating. And finally, reject violence because not only is the impulse towards censorship low intelligence thing. It's also a low humanity impulse, right? And I've seen us basically try to put in here, writing that it's really to the point that talking about how when people begin to try to kill people, injure people, commit acts of violence against people who basically do not agree with them, they have declared themselves to be subhuman, right? So, well, all of these things are, I suppose, nice, but at the end of the day, any writer can write them, right? So that doesn't get to show you guys a philosopher, right? Like just dodgy novelist that he is, and we have he's based on what we have done so far, not established him as a philosopher. How is Shoenka a philosopher? So I'm going to be looking at Shoenka's idea of relational differences, and 4 elements of that, the mythological origins, that is in the story of Asunda, the slave of Orishana, and then this metaphysics, basic and the most important concept here that I want to think is a piece of transition. Then which I have sort of transposed into a relational piece, and then finally Shoenka has the empirical state on nature, like we have many of the Western political philosophers. So to begin with the story of Atunda, so Atunda was basically just a slave of Orishala, whom Shoenka defines or describes as the primary genitor of God and earth, who had just one slave, Atunda. So there are no details really concerning how Orishala and Atunda conducted their business for a long time. Before this fateful day when Atunda decided that he was enjoy his masterpiece, and then rode that right down the hill, and rode the future down the hill, targeting his master, and rest is part of the history or mythology, right? So I don't know, perhaps at least in Shoenka's own reading of the myth, because Orishala is not human per se, perhaps because of the sheer strength of his life force. What had happened was not the death of Orishala upon the impact of Orishala's doctrine. Basically, what happened instead is that Orishala's being fragmented into many different pieces, right? Shoenka calls it 1001, but we have already established that it's a poet, right? So that might not be exact. So the being of Rishala became fragmented into so many living parts and then created a multiplicity of beings. I'm going to leave you handy a bit there and talk about Shoenka's metaphysics, their piece of transition. Now, yes, so the abyss of transition, for the moment of time, let me just quickly define it as essential growth. According to Shoenka, the essential growth of that lies between one area of existence and another, right? But of course, this is an expansive notion. And because what we understand the existence, we understand it to reconfigure the space and time, right? So the abyss of transition actually has these two dimensions to it. There is the dimension of spatiality, and then there is the dimension of temporality. I'll deal with temporality first. So there is this quite popular, I don't know, I was reading the book sometime when I thought I would do something esoteric, something really rare, until I started to talk to people and I realized it's quite popular, right? It's called the fourth stage. Basically, when you consider the abyss of transition as the growth between different areas of existence.
Sometimes the paper is so straight that
Yeah.
I don't work with that.
Okay, I'll just keep.
Is that an intention? 1 minute.
There's just one person that is actually.
Yeah.
It's one.
Or you still have to stick to
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand. I will just give. Sure. Yes, so the abyss of transition can be understood both in spatial and temporal terms. Showing that, please go to the slide on slide 16 or so, mythology and metaphysics.
Yes, 16.
When you consider the abyss of transition in spatial terms, yeah, it has, we say that it has this mythological origin, which picks up basically from the continuation of the story of Amsterdam. Right. So Orishala had both a divine and a mortal essence. And when the rock impacted Orishala, what basically happened is that the being was fragmented in such a way that, I mean, this is myth, right? In such a way that the divine fragments of his being went one way, the mortal essence of his being went another way. And God knows how huge the rock was, or what the strength of Atunai's was. What the rendering of that story is that these two different parts of the essence of the Shangla became separated with light years of space, right? And it was like that. That is basically what accounts for, according to Shrinka, the difference between gods and men, deities and men, right? Those deities moved fragmented towards one side, men fragmented towards another side. But the Yoruba mythology, spirituality has such a reconciliatory temper that neither of equal senses, right? There are two populations that, as we go ahead, felt complete in itself, right? The spiritual essence, that is the part that became the deities, and sort of started to yearn for the mortal essence, right? And then the mortal essence started to yearn for the spiritual essence. But because of the time that had passed, that space between the mortal and the divine had already become thickened into an almost impenetrable forest. And there is a whole part of Yoruba mythology that is about the deities trying to hack a way through that forest to reach humankind, right? So that is where Shinga takes the concept of the abyss of transition from, right? So if you then look at it, you can break down the abyss of transition, breaking it down. You can break down the concept of the abyss of transition to mean essentially any distance between 2 points, right? Or 2 states, whether it is physical, emotional, imaginative, and biological. And so I can then basically transpose that concept and tease out what I call the relational distance, for example, which I've defined as the distance between hearts and minds, right? Distance that is often created by an initial disagreement that basically worsens or decreases over time, right? And then I call this the relational abyss. And just to sort of play around with the concept of being more, I'm saying here that even the journey between, or the journey of self-improvement, right, can be construed as the journey between your present self and then your future self, right? And the self, small letter s, self, capital letter S, right? And between your present self and the self that you want to become, a lot can happen, right? It's that, I mean, basically that is that, right? In between those 2 points. And then Jericho, of course, who is one of the major scholars of Shinka, explains concepts of things that expanding to so many different kinds of worlds. But not every conceivable relational distance can be as an abyss, right?
So fresh situations of disagreement, when they are not complicated by a history of negativity about prostitutes and abuse. So by definition, an abuse is a difference that is very difficult to navigate, right? But not impossible, but very difficult because it has sort of worsened over time. The moment you have no disagreements with one person, it doesn't then become an abuse, right? Unless, of course, before that particular disagreement, there was a history, right? Bridging a relational gulf, relational abuse cannot be a walk in the park. I mean, like I've said, it's a forest, not a park, right? And the Trinity also has this hypothetical state of nature. I'm going to speak about that. Right, you are dead, basically is the worsening of the abyss, right? It is no longer a relational gulf. The difference is no longer ideological, right? Or what happens in ideological censorship has now given way to eternal censorship. I'm going to also skip over that. I just want to show how showing that justifies violence. The only a situation in which according to Schrenker, violence can be justified is when that violence is going to open up the space for plural politics, right? It is when people are stifled, when difference is stifled. That is the only time for showing that the only situation in which you can justify violence. So you take out whoever the oppressor or whoever the oppressed party is, and then give it a look, let pluralism prevail again. So I've quoted here something he said. I think still Samarkand and the market better contain 300,000 flowers and so taking sense and millions that's the few bad. So violence based justifiable if and only if it's open the space for a truly pluralistic politics. Back to Sudan, right? And I think all right. So conclusion is that one, I think I'm able to show that showing encourages only the summary use of violence, setting political national differences. Also, trying to show that it's also quite insights into our relational differences are created in the first place and how they are no longer anticipated. Also try to show our proposals and explanations pathway of relational differences, violence. And finally, that Schrenker's position on violence is one of basic projection. Is it only provides so that if that violence is going to create a plural space for politics, then it can be done. And what I wanted to show is how that is very similar to political violence. Who also think about the solution of protection plural political space as the only one that is taken on by means.
Because he feels that
one of the things that
why they
but it's not very short. That's goes to the question of who it doesn't know. Remember, because of the governance of that, nothing solved. The problem that philosophy, nothing. So, like theory, philosophy also publishes a series of controversies. You never can have it box is important. It's what it is, it's what it is not. But I urge you, because don't consider I see two of me summarize this your thesis. Simple or complex or simple or just one simple summary of my activities. And brother is that it's not actually can be read as solution. That at the end of the day, that is it was the emotion correct that's what as an additional very fast brother one. The second one is what's the plan is and showing that it says the philosophy is about space and positive human relation. Thank you very much. And before it's on yeah, click around.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I wanted to ask about the particular condition that American parents could give for girls, that is the opening of the global space. And to ask whether in many empirical accounts of violence, people who are enacting violence aren't making claims that their violence is for that purpose. So how do you differentiate between the objective plural space and the subjective plural space, the individual who perpetrates violence and decides that he's going to, or she's going to
Okay, respond. Thank you for providing the question. Yes, I mean, it would be one of the good justifications for violence, especially when you ask people who are perpetrating this violence, acts of violence themselves. Absolutely, and this is why the pacifists, the John Locke, John Rawls, I mean, when we leave philosophical playing about activism, for example, we have Kant, says eye for an eye, makes the world blind, right? And this is precisely the reason why this pacifist sort of completely rejects violence. Their politics is one of complete, absolute non-violent politics. Because, and Arendt especially sort of hints at this, that even that provides of that particular justification is not, cannot be taken as universal. It's something that if there was the ability to agree on it, all the people involved would have to agree. Because once violence begins to thing, right, even if it begins truly as an attempt to open up the plural space, it's something that quickly takes on a life of its own. Because it's so criminally unforgivable. And it's always better to try with violence.
Okay, thank you. Another one. Yeah, as others wonder and what they want to ask, I was about asking you if your conceptualization of violence, liberal or institutional, and that I'm wondering when modern state comes in here. Because the state is the only institution that has what we call legitimate use of the violence. And in most of the violence that uses violence, there is justification. That's one. So are you discussing this violence at the level of the individual or at the level of institutions, in which case the state comes in? Either way, even at individual, but we know that history has recorded revolutions which came out of protests, migrating, riots, violence leads to massacre, leads to liberation of people, and it's transformation to qualitative to quantitative, then there's leap on the society and the present. Is this part of the violence that you are also talking about? And if not, do you think it will be necessary for women to your violence, etc. position? So that it's a belong to civilians. Any other comment? Yeah, yes, why not?
So, thank you. I'm just wondering if, based on your, different how you advise the symbols, if it's not any discussing, if we are just managing, think it's problematic in the way it's just like, that's the question. So the second question is, the second observation is when you can show you know, there's this debate if you can remove personnel from work or not from this. How are we looking at history of social work within the context of Nigerian states? Does it really fit into this the way it categorized as an instrumentalist? Because one of the allegations leveled against things at the point in time used to be superiors and now it's quiet because the new is the one charging.
It's you.
I'm just saying, I think
so guys, the particular regulation. All right, you want to respond to the while we take the last question. The first.
Yes, sir.
Please, get ready.
There's a question online.
Okay, there's a question from.
Oh no, they said, can the speaker please speak up or come closer?
I think I said that.
Sorry, since over 30 minutes ago.
Okay, oh, sorry. We didn't.
Now, responding to questions, speak louder. So that. But
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you for the question. Regarding containers, so for me, generally when I use categories, I consider categories to be something like perforated containers, right? So it's not that things things belong to people. I think that categories are still very useful. Categories are very useful structures to people. Not that they are going to be perfect, but, because, for example, Weber, who is a status social violence, sort of also was alive to dangers and risks of violence, not violence even in the hands of so-called states, right? And then totalitarianism and all that. Whether shouldn't that persona or personality can be removed from his philosophy. I don't think it's a big deal, but I know that there are times when he himself has been engaged in certain, if micro acts of violence. For example, at the time when he held the station, there was basically at one point. Allegedly. Yeah.
that was false. Not false.
Yeah, false. Yeah, which leads to your question that my conception of violence.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what good.
All right, so we take all the questions in the overview. Let's welcome the person online. Michael from West of Nigeria, Chicago. Right? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So Michael
It's from Kwara State.
Kwara State University. You have the floor. Okay, a round of applause.
Mr. Malcolm, can you hear us, sir?
Well, I can see it first.
Hello, sir. Can you hear us? Please indicate if you can hear us.
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, sir.
Please proceed, Michael.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm talking about a theorization of pluriaxial hegemony theory. I mean, a theorization of pluriaxial hegemony. Theories have always been tools to explain most of the time the operational modalities of phenomenon, both intellectually and especially within the academic setting. We have had several instances where Western theories have been applied to African situations, which most of the time do not actually match the occurrences that they are talking about, or some most such occurrences appropriately. And that's why we attempt to bring about this theory of pluriaxial hegemony. The theory itself, we could note that Gramsci has talked about hegemony, and he has reinterrogated that concept of hegemony to mean domination by consent. And in this particular instance, hegemony is a concept of power, a theory of power that is applied to explain power relations in the society. And for Gramsci, he reinterrogated it to mean different, he reinterrogated to mean to connote dominance of one state within a confederation. The dominance of one state within a confederation. But fundamentally, it has been explained by Astrup, Griffith, and Tiffin to me that hegemony is known to be the power of the ruling class to convince others, that's other classes, that their interests are actually the interest of all. So in this way, domination is exerted not by force, nor even necessarily by active persuasion, but by a more subtle, inclusive power over the economy and over state apparatuses such as education and the media. So why Gramsci's postulation about the unit seems to, it has limited possibilities of direct revolutionary struggle for control of the means of production. It nonetheless acknowledges that success in the struggle to create a new hegemony will greatly depend on the prior war of position in the form of struggle over ideas that can accomplish the task. So Gramsci refers to this as a counter-hegemonic struggle, and which in the course of working on this theory, we also acknowledge it as the possibility of resistance within the political space. But hegemony is important to political analysis of a post-colonial state because it is historically positioned within the colonial history of the colonial people. And it also borders on the description of power over, as power over the powerless, such as the leaders over the led, the state over the public, oppressors over the oppressed, bourgeoisie over the proletariat, and very particularly the gender question is also part of it. So, but the pluriasia hegemony that we're talking about becomes more important post-colonial political analysis of African nations because of its conscious positioning within a multicultural society. So its power to explain at the same time to mediate socio-political relations of pluralistic society characterized by strong sentimental and even sometimes volatile competing interests, which always deliberately and politically contextualized. For example, such as policies of resource distribution, gender politics, politics of development, politics of power distribution, ethnic politics, even religious politics. So, and as we have mentioned, pluralistic hegemony extends the sphere of hegemony to other levels of socio-political relations in this process. And it believes that it's not just only the state that can wield the power over. As we have said earlier, the pluralistic hegemony recommends and explains that there could be counter hegemony in form of resistance that could be so overwhelming where groups are cohesively in unity and they see themselves or they wield that power together collectively in such a way that they can exert their influence, even as to pressure the state into taking positive decisions. So in this process, it converts agency on more groups. It emphasizes also, it also creates rooms for dialogical exchanges between the leaders and the led. And at intergroup levels also, and it constructs binaries and identifies where possible hybridity. So, and so all of this. So it is a flexible theoretical instrument that provides adequate framework for a political analysis of a multicultural society. Therefore, as a theory of power and change, pluralistic hegemony has some basic aesthetics. And these basic aesthetics could be identified in the following: that it seeks to form alliances at different levels of socio-political relation, which by implication it connotes not just a new hegemony, but also plural hegemonies. When hegemonies are duplicated or formed at other levels, so it becomes multiple. So the idea of new hegemonies becomes important because it creates competing hegemonies at different levels and springs pressure groups that can dislodge the dominant class for better and more people-friendly governmental policies. And also too, where total dislodgement is unattainable, yet it seeks to put a check. It has by initiating other hegemonies, even when it has not completely succeeded, the mere fact that it is rising up and being practically demonstrated, being pushed, is also puts a kind of check on the dominant hegemony through sustained pressure so that it becomes courteous.
His network is not from issue.
Network problem.
Yes.
My fault.
And a new hegemony. So this is hegemonious offensive. This is regarded as hegemonious.
Hello, Michael.
He's gone.
Okay, so as I was saying, that this is with the theory refers to this as hegemonic offensive. So here, the power we're talking, the powers of epistemology and ideas have to be exploited strongly, so as to be able to upstage the dominant hegemony. The theory also postulates that there could be both subtle and overt hegemonies, and categorizes the latter as force or sometimes coercion. So it discourages the application of force, and it emphasizes dialogical exchange, which is a precursor to either agreement or consensus. So it emphasizes justice, which Raw argues is the basic structure of society, and fairness. And it holds that for a living society, hegemony struggle is a continuous process. It's a continuous process, and no one should envisage an utopian situation of the Marxian postulate. And also it recognizes persuasion as a necessary political instrument in a pluralistic society. So these are the aesthetics of the theory. So when we talk of pluriaxial hegemony, we can see that it there was a kind of theory that, a model that we developed, but unfortunately I cannot share the model here about this theory. So it is opinion that in the politics of space, desire for political power often serves as a primary motivation for participation in politics. So the model postulates that desire for power it drives individuals and political groups into competitive struggle. And this leads to one or even political party into power, and it's emblematic of political position, and power puts the individual or party in control. So, however, behind all this should be the overriding, the theory believes that behind the desire for power should be the overriding desire to serve the people or the nation. Therefore, the stages of politics or space could be identified as desire to serve, others of this theory, desire to serve, decision to pass over, to possess power, and participation in politics. So possession of power or otherwise, and then service to the state, which will eventually lead to resource distribution. So the theory goes further to the delineation of the stage looks very simple from what we have just explained, but they don't give automatic success to the political party or personages. Therefore, there are behavioral and political parameters that dictate success in the context of.
Thank you very much. You have to round off now.
Okay, sir. All right, sir. All right, sir. So, in all, the behavioral and political parameters that the theory recommends, they are up to about 22, which are political. Those are in the political space is the struggle for power to also must observe in order to have successes. So this is applied. The theory is recommended for application in both in the literary works, which could be either drama, poetry, the theater, drama, literature generally, for explication. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. While you are sitting there, I think the presenters should come on. I'm going to have 7 minutes at the end of the panel. So we'll spend 7 minutes, 7 seconds. Thank you very much, man. In all of these that we have done today, let's see if we have some question for Michael online. If you have some question for Michael or comments, this indicates so that there's clarification. Yeah, never mind, Michael. Evening papers are like that. Well, tired and exhausted, but somebody is trying to raise some question.
Thank you so very much for your presentation, Michael. Could you confirm if you can hear me, please? Hello, Michael, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you, please.
Thank you. I was very interested in your topic, theorization of pleurexial hegemony. And I know that when you talk about pleurexial ideologies, simply put, if I'm not delving into hegemony now, talking about the complementarity between the Western and indigenous ideology, having a kind of co-join, right, in theorizing. However, I know that you have the limited time. I was wondering if you could please run us through your model of analysis, because you applying pleurexial hegemony in politics of multicultural states. I'm not sure how the sampling was done and how your resolution was, was arrived at. Where exactly was your model sample, right? And what analysis, what's your methodology in analyzing all of this? I know the concept, but there was no in-depth analysis of what or explanation of what you meant by the concept of pleurexial hegemony. I think the most of your paper was focusing on hegemony itself, as a concept. Could you please speak to that? Thank you.
Over to you, Michael.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, this work is still a work in progress. That's number one. Number two, yes, but still there is a part of our question too that number two, it was also a product of is a study, a study of some Nigerian literature, up to about 8 of them, by different dramatists that address the issue of politics directly in relation to the Nigerian situation, and which also can be applied to other spheres in Africa. And so it was from this that it was from this that this idea came up, having read also about Gramsci's hegemony and hegemony widely, and other forms of theories too, like Marxism, how they are related, and many other theories like that. So that's how this idea of pleurexial hegemony came up.
Okay, thank you very much. Other comments? Get any other comments? Gentlemen and ladies, I like what Michael has worked in programs. Efforts to theorize the African way is also work in. Now, as the work continues in progress, I need to remind us certain things. One, times there are when you present paper or you make any presentation, maybe lecture or something, and somebody walks up to you and says, "Oh, I like that presentation. It is theoretically grounded." This does not mean grounded theory. No. It simply means that your paper has made very exceptional attempt to explain this scenario. It does not mean you are grounded theory. Again, you can use what is not necessarily theory to framework an argument. Doesn't make it theory. So what I've presented the other time, we go through where as proceeded by the writer, the author of that paper, Ogbewe was not portrayed as a thief. No. That Ogbewe fact was used to explain content of it, which also regrets, as we did, that theoretical framework is not necessarily here. All these we must know in creating our efforts to rigorously the rights for Africa. And then it doesn't have to come up. It doesn't have to come up. Functionalities and policies, you know. And then when people theorize for either a creative position or even normative position. There are scholars who have theorized society. Let's look at what we call the social contract theories. The first of them sat in the confinement role and projected an imagination of how society can, and then described it as a dichotomy between state of nature and state of contract. So he never mentioned here. Some other writers who knows like him also took it away from that. Oh, yeah, although there was a transformation between one state and the other, but the former state is like this, not like that. The new state is like it's not like that. And then we ended up having three primary, several other ones, social contract theories. Okay, only one of them is the term social contract. So I'm saying this to emphasize that in our attempt to theorize, it does not mean that we are going to force or box that thing into theory. Make a declaration, create a rigorous explanation for it. Let people get what you are saying. Then scholars will not pick your explanation there as a potent instrument for explaining something. And in that case, sometimes you don't expect what to put forth in become theory overnight. It doesn't have to be. At the elementary level, we say, it becomes a theory. That thing becomes a theory when it has, almost globally been accepted as having a capacity to explain scenario. So don't let us be in a hurry to call it theory. Why? Subject it to test, release it to society. Let scholars engage. And the process of engagement and re-engagement, interrogation and re-interrogation, that thing will evolve. The world is evolved on its own as a theory. That's it. I want to thank everybody. That's very good. Never appreciate that. Thank you also, man, for the great. But I know about I need to send that paper and then go to it. Thank you, Michael, all the way from.
Thank you so much, sir. God bless you. Thank you, sir.
You have given us a quasi version of the hegemonic idea, and I must say it's commendable. Let us keep the writing for Africa, or let us for the Thank you very much. Yeah, we have to take photograph.